Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room carried that kind of tense hum only soldiers knew, the quiet before something irreversible. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their pale glare washing the long steel table where mission maps glowed in holographic blue. Officers leaned in, trading clipped words, marking routes, adjusting projections as if every stroke could keep death a step away. Boots shuffled, radios hissed, pens scratched across plastic-sheathed folders. And yet where she sat at the far edge, spine straight, eyes steady, it was as though she had never walked through the door. Captain Mara Vey, 34 years old, 10 years in uniform, dozens of deployments behind her, a sniper, a pilot, an operative who could fly low or shoot far. On paper, her record spoke louder than most of the people in that room, but paper didn't matter in places where politics dressed itself in camouflage. In this room, reputation did not follow her. Silence did. She didn't move, didn't clear her throat, didn't force her way in. The art of being overlooked, she had learned, was dangerous but revealing. When people ignored you, they said more than they intended. They exposed their bias, their doubt, their fear of seeing something they could not explain. The colonel's voice cut steady through the static. Primary strike zone is here, Sector 12. We insert at 300. Resistance is expected. Communications blackout once we cross the ridge. Contingencies A through F are loaded in the packet. Someone near the map pointed at a red-marked zone. What about the civilians? Reports show movement in that valley. It's not clear if they've evacuated. The colonel paused too long. We'll adjust on the ground. Speed is priority. Mission first. That answer landed heavy, but no one argued. Not out loud. Mara's eyes flicked, catching the tiny reactions others missed, the lieutenant's jaw tightening, the medic biting down a protest, the sergeant staring at his boots. They were soldiers. They knew the weight of collateral damage. They also knew they had no voice here. Mara did, but she didn't use it, not yet. Her fingers wrapped tighter around the coffee cup. It had gone cold. She hadn't taken a sip. She wasn't thirsty. She was waiting. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Something buried deep in her own chest, a truth she had carried since the day she signed on for this mission. But not yet. The colonel wrapped up the briefing, tapping the edge of the table. Any questions? Silence. Her silence, too. The room cleared in a wave of boots and low chatter. Maps dimmed, projectors blinked off, and she remained seated, invisible again. She liked it that way sometimes, but not tonight. As the last officer left, the colonel glanced at her. His eyes flicked, then moved past as though reconsidering. He didn't call her name. He never did. Mara stood, her chair scraping quietly against the floor, and stepped into the corridor. The air was colder there, tinged with diesel, gun oil, and the distant thrum of generators. Soldiers moved in clusters, some laughing too loudly to mask their nerves, others quiet with thoughts they wouldn't share. The mission was a shadow over all of them. Everyone carried it differently, some like armor, some like chains. Mara walked alone. Her bunk was the same as the others, metal frame, thin mattress, blanket folded with machine precision. She sat on the edge and pulled off her boots, letting the ache in her feet remind her she was still human. For a moment, she stared at the floor, the small cracks in the concrete, the dust gathering where the mop hadn't reached, details no one noticed, details she always did. Her hands rubbed together, restless. She thought about speaking up at the briefing, about telling them what she knew, but how could she? How could she make them believe that this mission wasn't what they thought? She lowered her head, elbows on her knees, breath steady. Because she had seen it before. The same patterns, the same silence before betrayal, the same dismissal of warnings. And beneath it all, civilians, always civilians. Her memory flashed, unbidden, unwanted. A dusty village 5 years ago. Children's laughter one moment, screams the next. She had been too far away to stop it, too slow, too human. She had carried a boy out of the rubble, his small frame limp against her chest, dust caking his hair. He hadn't survived the flight. His hand had slipped from hers in the air. No metal had followed, only silence. And now Sector 12. Another valley, another set of faces who didn't know what was coming. Mara clenched her jaw until it hurt. She had sworn she wouldn't let it happen again. But how could she stop it when she was just a shadow in the room? The lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside, footsteps approached, slow, hesitant. A knock on her door. Mara. It was Elias, one of the younger medics, barely 25. His voice carried that raw honesty soldiers hadn't yet buried under cynicism. She opened the door. He stood there, eyes restless, fingers fiddling with the edge of his pack. Mind if I sit? She stepped aside. He dropped onto the edge of the bunk, leaning forward like the weight of tomorrow already bent his spine. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't like the one in the briefing room. This one was softer, human. Finally, Elias exhaled. You felt it too, didn't you? The way he skipped over the civilians. Mara didn't answer. Elias rubbed his face with both hands. I keep telling myself it'll be fine. That command knows better than we do, but I keep thinking about my sister. She's got 2 kids. If this valley were their home, he cut himself off, shaking his head. I don't know how to carry that. Mara watched him. His honesty hit something in her chest. She wanted to tell him he wasn't wrong, that his fear was the right one, that she carried it too. But she only said, you carry it by not letting go of it. Fear reminds you what matters. He looked at her, surprised. Maybe he expected something colder, a veteran's dismissive shrug. Instead, her words landed with weight. Yeah, he said quietly, maybe you're right. He stood, adjusted his pack, paused in the doorway. People don't see it, but you care more than anyone else in that room. I just wanted you to know I see it. And then he left. Mara sat back, heart steady but heavier. Elias' words lingered. She didn't want to be seen. Not really. Not anymore. But part of her, the part she tried to bury, needed to know that she wasn't alone in carrying it. Night deepened outside. Generators droned. Somewhere distant, a dog barked. The world felt both endless and unbearably close. Mara lay down on the bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Instead, she thought about the valley, about civilians who might already be gathering what little they owned, preparing to run into the dark, about the orders that ignored them, about the silence she had chosen in the briefing, and about the truth she had not yet spoken. She rolled onto her side, eyes closing finally against the hum of the base. The mission clock ticked closer to 300. When she rose, when the rotors began to thunder and the night air filled with grit, she would carry more than her rifle. She would carry the weight of the broken, the fear of the afraid. Because her quiet heart had always carried more than anyone realized. And tomorrow, it might be the only thing strong enough to keep them alive. She stood alone in the dark hangar, listening. The helicopters waited like crouched predators, their rotors still, their black-painted frames swallowing the dim light. Tools clinked distantly, mechanics making last checks in silence. The air smelled of oil, metal, and dust, a taste she'd known half her life. Her hand rested on the side of the bird she'd be flying in. Cold steel, steadier than people. Machines didn't lie to you. They didn't look past you, pretend you weren't there. They either worked or they didn't. You knew where you stood. Behind her, laughter echoed. A cluster of soldiers swapping half-jokes, trying to push back the weight pressing down on all of them. The kind of brittle humor that broke the second the first bullet flew. Mara didn't join. She pulled her gloves tighter, adjusted her headset. Every small motion was ritual. Ritual steadied the mind, and her mind needed steadying. Because the valley wasn't going to forgive them. Not tonight. Footsteps approached. Heavy boots, a slow rhythm, deliberate. Captain Vey. She turned. Colonel Danner stood a few feet away, shoulders square, jaw set like stone. His eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, unreadable. the kind of man who thought silence was strength and orders were law. "Sir." He studied her for a moment as if weighing something. Then, "You've kept quiet more than usual." She met his gaze, unreadable in return. "I've been listening." His mouth twitched, almost a smirk. "Listening won't save anyone when we're knee-deep out there. You know your role, you do it, nothing more." The words weren't a warning. They were a dismissal dressed as authority. "Yes, sir," she said, neutral, controlled. But inside a flicker, he knew, or at least suspected, that she saw through the mission in a way the others didn't, that she carried knowledge unspoken. When he walked away, the air felt heavier. She exhaled slowly, forcing her shoulders to loosen. Focus, one moment at a time. The crew began to load. Packs, rifles, medical kits. Every click of metal on metal echoed louder than it should have. Elias passed her carrying his bag, face pale in the dim light. He gave a small nod. She returned it. No words. Words wouldn't help him tonight. They boarded. Inside the bird, red light washed over faces. The rotors spun to life, thunder filling the hangar, rattling ribcage. Mara strapped in, rifle across her lap, eyes on the floor. Boots vibrated against the deck as the helicopter lifted. Darkness swallowed them. Through the open side, she saw the base shrink, lights disappearing, ground turning into black waves. Above, the stars were sharp, cold. Silence stretched. No one wanted to break it. But then the sergeant, Ortiz, muttered, "Feels wrong." Heads turned, not at him but at the words, heavy as they were. Ortiz leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Command, pushing this too fast. Intel's thin, and that valley," he stopped, shook his head. "I've seen this play before, doesn't end clean." No one argued. Not even the lieutenant, who usually barked at Ortiz for undermining morale. Tonight, even he stayed quiet. Elias shifted, knuckles white on his pack straps. Mara noticed. She noticed everything. She closed her eyes for a moment, let the rotor's beat sync with her pulse. She thought of the boy again, the one she couldn't save. The dust, the silence after his last breath. It came back sharper now, as if the valley ahead was already pulling her into that same past. When she opened her eyes, Ortiz was watching her. His gaze lingered, searching, as if he knew she carried something more. But he said nothing, turned away. The helicopter dipped, banking left. The comm crackled in their headsets. 10 minutes to drop zone. The team tensed, weapons checked, safety off. Mara breathed slow. Her heart didn't race, not yet. Fear wasn't her enemy, distraction was. Through the side, the terrain rolled beneath them, jagged ridges, deep shadows, the faint glow of scattered fires in the valley. Civilians, still there. She knew it without being told. People clinging to home, hopping the storm would pass them by. It never did. Her jaw tightened. The comm hissed again, static, then a voice, not command, not their frequency, distorted, broken, foreign words harsh, cut off. The pilot cursed under his breath, adjusted the dial. Interference could be local chatter. But Mara knew better. She recognized patterns when others dismissed noise. It wasn't random, it was warning. She leaned forward but stopped herself. If she spoke now, they'd dismiss it. Just noise, they'd say, just paranoia. So she kept it inside, for now. The bird jolted. Approaching LZ, the pilot barked. The ramp dropped, wind rushing in like knives. Darkness roared. Go, go, go. Boots hit dirt. The smell hit harder, dry earth, smoke, something acrid that clung to the back of the throat. Mara landed last, scanning the horizon. Shadows stretched, broken only by faint firelight from the valley below. The team moved fast, fanning out, weapons up. She crouched low, rifle steady, eyes cutting through night scope. The ridge loomed ahead, their path down into the valley like a throat waiting to swallow them. "Form up," Ortiz whispered. 2 by 2, keep it tight." They moved. Every sound was magnified, crunch of boots on stone, breath in masks, distant bark of a dog that didn't belong. Mara's finger hovered near the trigger, steady, patient. Halfway down the slope, Elias stumbled. A loose rock clattered, tumbling down into the dark. The sound echoed too far, too loud. Everyone froze. Silence. Then voices from below. Shouts in a language half the team didn't know but Mara did, rough, alarmed. They'd been heard. Positions, Ortiz hissed. The team dropped into cover, rifles up. Shadows moved below, 3, 4 figures, maybe more, slipping through rocks, flashlights cutting the dark. Mara steadied her rifle. Her scope found one figure, heart pounding through her ear. She could take the shot, clean, silent enough. But she hesitated. These weren't soldiers. She could tell by the way they moved, the way their hands trembled. Civilians with weapons, protecting home. Her breath slowed. But Ortiz's shot cracked first. One figure dropped, then another. The valley lit with chaos. Shouts returned fire, muzzle flashes strobing in the dark. Mara pressed against stone, scope steady. She didn't fire. Not yet, she couldn't. Her finger trembled not from fear but from the weight of choice. Because she saw the child. In the flicker of a flashlight, she caught the smallest outline, a boy, no older than 10, clutching the hand of one of the fallen. His mouth open in a silent cry she couldn't hear over the gunfire. Her chest tightened like a vice. The memory and the present blurred, dust, screams, small hands slipping. She swallowed hard, blinked, forced herself back into the moment. The boy disappeared into the dark as the firefight escalated. Ortiz yelled. Elias dove to cover, medics pack clattering. Bullets chipped rock near Mara's head. She finally squeezed the trigger, one shot clean. An armed figure fell. Another darted away. The fight lasted seconds, maybe a minute. Then silence fell heavy. Smoke, dust, heartbeats too loud. The team regrouped, breath ragged. Ortiz spat on the ground. Locals, damn fools. Mara said nothing. Elias' hands shook as he bandaged a grazed arm. There was a kid, he whispered, almost to himself. Ortiz shot him a look. Eyes forward, Doc, not your problem. But Mara's eyes found Elias. For a split second she let him see it, that she knew, that it was her problem too. The ridge loomed still, the valley waited. And deep in her chest, Mara carried the truth heavier than ever. Something about this mission was wrong, more wrong than they realized. And she hadn't told them. Not yet. She crouched in the dust, hands steady though her chest burned. The firefight was over, but the silence it left behind was louder than gunfire. The team gathered in the shadows of rock, faces pale under helmet lights. Smoke still curled from Ortiz's rifle barrel, drifting into the night air like ghosts reluctant to leave. No one spoke at first, only breath, hard, shallow, uneven. Then Ortiz muttered, locals with rifles, always the same. They can't tell the difference between defense and suicide. Mara didn't look at him. Her eyes scanned the slope below, searching. She wasn't looking for threats. She was looking for the boy. But he was gone, swallowed by the valley. Her jaw clenched. She forced herself to blink, to breathe, to stay here and not slip into memory. Elias broke the silence. His voice trembled, but he kept it low. One of them was a kid. I saw him. Ortiz groaned. Christ, Doc, you're not gonna start with that, are you? Kid or no kid, he was there. Wrong place, wrong time. Happens. Happens? Elias' voice sharpened. We're supposed to be saving lives, not. He cut himself off, teeth sinking into his lip. The lieutenant turned, glaring. Enough, eyes front, we move now. No argument. Orders didn't leave space for it. They rose, weapons ready, and pushed deeper down the ridge. The path narrowed, forcing them single file. Rocks scraped under boots, every sound magnified in the cavernous dark. The air grew thicker, tinged with wood smoke. Somewhere below, fires burned. Mara moved near the back, rifle sweeping the shadows. But her mind wasn't quiet. It throbbed with the memory of the boy's outline, of Elia's voice breaking in the silence, of the colonel's dismissal at the briefing. She wanted to speak, wanted to stop them all right there on the ridge and tell them what she knew, that the valley wasn't just a battlefield, that command's intelligence was incomplete or worse, dishonest. But she didn't. Not yet. Because speaking without proof was just noise, and noise in the wrong moment got soldiers killed. So she carried it, quiet, heavy. Halfway down, the comm crackled, static first, then the pilot's voice strained. Be advised, we're picking up movement on thermal. Multiple heat signatures converging from east and south. Looks like you stirred a hornet's nest. The lieutenant cursed under his breath. Copy, we'll adjust. He signaled, hands sharp in the dim. Break south, avoid contact, stay dark. The team veered, slipping into a dry riverbed. The walls rose on either side, narrow, jagged, forcing them low. Shadows pressed close, the kind that made rifles feel like toys against the unknown. Elia stumbled again. Mara caught his elbow, steadying him without a word. His eyes flicked to hers, gratitude, fear, both tangled before he looked away. Ortiz muttered behind them, "We're walking into a funnel, perfect place for an ambush." He wasn't wrong. The riverbed twisted, carrying them deeper until the fires of the valley flickered faintly ahead. Distant voices carried, shouting, crying, the sharp report of another rifle not aimed at them. Civilians, Mara knew it before she saw. They crept closer. And then the sound hit them, not gunfire, not shouting, wailing. Dozens of voices rising together, grief made raw. The team froze at the bend. The lieutenant peered ahead, face tense. What the hell? He didn't finish. Because they saw it. The valley opened suddenly, revealing a small settlement, stone huts, narrow alleys, fires burning in makeshift barrels. And in the center, lit by flickering flames, lay bodies, covered in blankets lined in rows. Men, women, children, too many. Civilians dead. The wailing came from those left behind, kneeling in the dirt, rocking back and forth. Their grief carried like a knife through the night air. The team froze in place. Every rifle lowered slowly, useless against this. Elias' breath hitched audibly. My God. Ortiz swore under his breath, words hard, defensive. Not us, couldn't be, we just got here. But Mara knew better. The patterns were too clear. Airstrikes, indiscriminate, earlier than scheduled. Orders, quietly shifted behind briefing room doors. She felt the truth twist inside her, sharp and undeniable. This was what she hadn't told them. That the mission wasn't just about clearing insurgents. It was about wiping the valley clean. Collateral, all of it already written into the plan. She had seen it in classified fragments weeks ago. Buried memos, redacted lines. She wasn't supposed to know, but she did. And she hadn't told them. Her stomach turned cold as she looked at the faces of her team, shadows lit by fire. They didn't know. They thought they were here to strike a target, secure a sector, get out. They didn't know they were standing in the aftermath of their own side's choices. The lieutenant finally spoke, voice low. We move, quiet, no contact. But Elias stepped forward, almost trembling. Sir, we can't just look at them. We can't just leave them here. Stand down, the lieutenant snapped. We are not here for civilians, we have a mission. Elias' mouth opened again, but Mara's hand closed over his arm. He looked at her, eyes blazing, pleading. And she shook her head, just enough to make him stop. Because she knew the truth and she couldn't let it break here. Not in the open, not when the valley was watching. The team slipped back into the shadows, leaving the wailing behind. The sound followed, echoing through the riverbed like a curse. Hours blurred as they moved deeper, nerves fraying. Every rustle of stone became an enemy, every shadow a threat, but none of it weighed heavier than what they had seen. When they finally stopped to rest in a hollow, no one spoke at first. Helmets came off. water bottles uncapped. Silence settled like ash. Then Ortiz muttered almost to himself, "That wasn't right. None of that was right." No one answered. Until Elias said softly, "We're not the good guys here, are we?" The words landed like a blow. No one wanted to look at him, not even Mara. But inside, she knew the answer already. She leaned back against the cold rock, eyes to the stars, silent, carrying. Because her heart, the quiet one they ignored, was already breaking under the weight of the truth. And she hadn't decided yet whether to speak it or let it bury her alive. Silence was not peace. On the second rotation after the failed raid on Outpost Seraph, the war councils across the Empire echoed with disbelief and fury. Reports from the surviving captains were contradictory, ships vanishing without trails, fire blooming from nowhere, sensors screaming as if blind. Words like ghost, impossible, untraceable were thrown around. And yet through that chaos, one fact remained: an entire Vanguard fleet had been annihilated, by Earth, by humans. The Council of Conquest gathered in the vast hall of Calthurian Prime, a cathedral of black stone and shimmering data panels, its ceiling hung with the banners of 1,000 conquered worlds. The lords of the Empire stood arrayed like statues, scaled, feathered, chitinous, furred, predators all, united by hunger. Admiral Kravath, scales dulled by shame, was forced to kneel before the council dais. "You lost 73 vessels," hissed the Prime Executor, her voice a razor in the air. "Explain or be stripped to bone." Kravath's tail lashed, his pride smoldered but fear drowned it. "My fleet was not defeated in battle, it was erased. The humans wield a weapon beyond comprehension. Their ships moved without moving. They were among us before our sensors marked the void's tremor. Every cannon struck from inside our formation. There was no warning, no counter." A ripple of unease broke across the lords. Even predators knew the stench of something more dangerous than themselves. "They cheat the void," snarled a warlord with tusks like iron beams. "No species cheats the void." "They did," Kravath spat, voice breaking. "I swear it. They tore the rules apart and remade them as theirs." The Prime Executor leaned forward, her many eyes glinting like shards of obsidian. "Then the humans have built what was forbidden, a blink drive." Murmurs thundered through the chamber. The blink drive was myth, an engine theorized by exiled physicists and silenced savants, a whisper of travel that did not crawl through wormholes or bend gravity but instead snapped across existence, bypassing all known laws. The Empire itself had spent centuries chasing it, sacrificing entire research colonies, only to declare it impossible. And yet here stood Kravath, swearing Earth had done what the galaxy could not. The Executor's mandibles clicked. If true, then humans are no prey, they are contagion, a species that steals tomorrow before it arrives. She turned to the gathered lords. "The answer is annihilation, no half measures." Across the dais, High Lord Shuren of the Ash clans rose, his armor humming with ancestral engines. "Executor, if we move to annihilate, we risk more than victory. If these humans have truly harnessed Blink, then they can strike anywhere, even here." The chamber fell into silence, colder than the void. Earth orbit, command ship Resolute. Captain Elias Vey stood before the great holomap, its light painting sharp angles across his gaunt face. His officers murmured behind him, voices taut with fear and awe. The Blink fleet's first engagement had not been planned for glory. It was meant to be a test, a probe into enemy strength. Instead, 73 enemy ships had died, torn apart in a storm of human fire. It should have felt like triumph. It felt like a warning. "They'll come back," murmured Lieutenant Arya, her eyes never leaving the map. "Stronger, smarter. They won't underestimate us again." Vey nodded. "Which is why we cannot wait for them. The Empire's strength is its arrogance, but arrogance can learn." At the edge of the chamber, Dr. Mara Keen, The physicist who had shepherded the Blink drive from impossible theory to living steel, leaned heavily on her cane. Her hair, once fire-black, was streaked with white, her frame bent by years of sacrifice. But her eyes burned with something fiercer than youth. "You've seen what Blink can do," she rasped. "But you must understand, it isn't invincibility. The drive stresses spacetime itself. It's unpredictable. If the Empire studies us long enough, they'll find patterns, exploitable ones. Blink is a blade sharp enough to cut the wielder." The room quieted. Vey turned to her, voice steady. "Doctor, then we sharpen it until it cuts the galaxy first." Calthurian Prime, the crack appears. The Empire's next fleet did not wait. Within 3 cycles the Armada assembled, 300 ships, dreadnoughts bristling like mountain fortresses, carriers dragging swarms of interceptors, their hulls glowing with the prayers of conquest. It was more than overwhelming force. It was spectacle, a message to all worlds watching. The fleet launched toward Sol with the inevitability of doom. But as the Armada crossed the deep lanes of void space, something happened. At first it was a whisper in the sensors, then it became screams. One dreadnought simply vanished, not destroyed, not attacked. Gone. Its escorts scrambled, clawing for explanation, only to feel their hulls shiver as if the void itself rebelled. Moments later, 3 more ships were torn apart from within, their reactors flaring white-hot, as though invisible knives had slipped into their guts. And then the impossible. Human ships appeared in their midst, 6 of them, sleek and unmarked by alien sigils, their surfaces alive with shimmer. They had not entered from hyperspace. They had not been tracked. They were simply there. Blink. Panic surged through the fleet. Orders clashed across comms, weapons fired blindly, dreadnought cannons ignited and missed. The human ships blinked again, reappearing behind, above, inside the formation, their broadsides ripping carriers open like eggs. The Empire's Armada was a fortress, but fortresses are meaningless when the enemy walks through walls. Within minutes, 30 ships were gone. Council of Conquest, cracks in stone. When word reached the council, the hall that once thundered with certainty now trembled with doubt. "They cannot be fought," one lord shrieked, his wings spread wide. "They strike like ghosts, our guns fire at shadows." "They are few," another roared. "Crush the earth before they breed their plague further." Shurin of the Ash clan spoke again, louder this time. "Open your eyes. We chase prey that cuts us from within. Every ship we lose is not just loss, it is proof to every vassal that the Empire can bleed." Already whispers spread across conquered worlds. Resistance flickers. They watch humanity and see hope. The Prime Executor's gaze turned colder than frozen steel. "Then we silence humanity before hope becomes wildfire. Assemble the Supreme Armada. Every ship, every legion, Earth will burn." And though her words were iron, though her mandibles clashed with finality, something had already shifted in the council. Fear. Not of Earth's strength alone, but of what it meant. The Empire had met something it could not predict, could not cage, could not understand. For the first time in 1,000 years, the predators had seen prey bite back. And deep inside the silence after the meeting adjourned, cracks spread through the stone of certainty. Earth orbit, the Resolve. On the Resolute, Captain Vey stood alone at the viewport, watching Earth turn beneath him. A fragile blue world, small against the endless dark. Home. He whispered, not to crew, not to command, but to the stars themselves. "They think they can burn us." He clenched his fist against the glass. "Let them try." Because humanity had seen the predators, and humanity had already learned how to strike where the monsters never looked, inside their armor, inside their fear. The first crack in the Empire had opened, and through cracks, light always followed. The void shuddered as the Empire moved. The Supreme Armada was not a fleet, it was a world breaker. Never before had it been assembled in full, for never before had the Empire known doubt. From 1,000 shipyards, from the forges of conquered systems, from the vaults where ancient titans of war had slumbered, the vessels came. Dreadnoughts vast enough to blot moons from sight, carriers birthing endless swarms of interceptors, Leviathan transports brimming with legions bred only for slaughter. At its heart loomed the Emperor's own flagship, the Apex, a monstrosity carved from blackstone and living alloy, kilometers of death forged into shape. 3,000 ships, 20 million warriors. And their destination, Earth. Council of Conquest, award decreed. The council had fallen silent after the Prime Executor's decree, yet silence did not mean unity. Behind closed doors the lords whispered. Fear gnawed at them, sharper than hunger. If humanity could wield Blink, then the foundations of the Empire itself, fear, inevitability, control, were in danger. High Lord Shurin of the Ash clans spoke to his closest allies in the echoing halls of Calthurian. His armor was stripped bare of sigils, a quiet rebellion against pomp. "They do not see it," he growled, voice low. "Every ship we send to Earth is a ship not guarding our borders. Every soldier we bleed is one less choking rebellion. Humanity has already won, even if Earth burns, for they have taught the galaxy the Empire can fail." Another lord hissed, "You dare speak treason." "I speak truth," Shurin replied, eyes hard as stone. "And mark me, when this armada falls, the Empire will crack, and when it cracks, my clan will not drown with it." For the first time, the Predator's halls echoed with the first scent of betrayal. Earth orbit, the preparation. On the Resolute, Captain Elias Vey watched the projections with grim focus. The Armada's path was clear. Time was short. Humanity had days, perhaps less, before the storm reached them. Every ship humanity possessed, hundreds of frigates, cruisers, and the small cadre of Blink-equipped vessels, was recalled to Sol. Orbital platforms were armed, planetary shields hastily strengthened. Ground forces dug in across Earth, Mars, and Luna, preparing for a war no sane strategist would believe winnable. But Vey's voice carried steel when he addressed his officers. "They think this is the end of us. They think their numbers alone will crush us, but they don't understand Blink, not yet. We don't fight their fleet head-on. We carve them apart piece by piece until their fear outweighs their hunger, until they know the galaxy is not theirs to own." Lieutenant Arya's jaw tightened. "Sir, even with Blink, 3,000 ships is a number," Vey cut her off. "Not inevitability, not destiny, just a number, and numbers can be broken." At the edge of the chamber, Dr. Marakeen coughed into her sleeve, blood flecking her lips. She hid it quickly, but not quickly enough. "Doctor," Vey asked. She waved him off. "Blink eats more than metal, Captain. It eats the ones who build it." Her voice was steady despite the pain. "But don't waste my suffering. Strike hard. Strike where they never expect. Every Blink must remind them, humans are not prey. We are the shadow in their throat." The galaxy watches. News traveled faster than fleets. Across the conquered stars, whispers spread like wildfire. In the mines of Drathis, slaves huddled in tunnels, passing forbidden words. Humans destroyed an armada. On the water world of Surash, amphibian priests raised forbidden songs, chanting of Earth's defiance as omens of change. On Valar, where the Empire's boot had never lifted, rebels painted human symbols on walls. Two hands clenched together, not in chains but in fists. Everywhere the galaxy turned its eyes toward Sol, not as a world about to be crushed, but as a spark that refused to die. The Armada arrives. The void above Neptune twisted with light. One by one, the Leviathans of the Supreme Armada fell from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming like night-given form. The sight alone was enough to drown hope. 3,000 ships, arrayed in perfect formation, cannons like mountains of fire aimed at a single blue world far ahead. On the bridge of the Apex, the Prime Executor herself stood at the prow, her carapace glinting with war ink. Around her, the command dais pulsed with the life signs of the fleet. "Today," she declared, her voice thundering across comms to every soldier, "we erase the blight. Today, we silence defiance. Humanity will be remembered not as rebels but as ash beneath our boots." The fleet roared in unison. And then silence fell. For the humans had appeared. Not hundreds, not even dozens, only 10 ships. 10 sleek, dark vessels blinked into existence in front of the armada, their hulls pulsing with impossible shimmer. 10 against 3,000. The executor's mandibles twitched in disdain. Pathetic. Yet as the order for annihilation left her lips, the 10 ships vanished. And reappeared inside the armada. Cannons flared, reactors ruptured, fire streaked the void. In seconds, 5 dreadnoughts were gutted, their carcasses drifting lifeless among their kin. Panic rippled through the formation. But again the humans blinked. Again and again. Everywhere, nowhere. The armada fired blindly, weapons scorching allies instead of phantoms. Interceptors swarmed and shredded nothing but void. The humans struck like ghosts with knives, carving the mountain one cut at a time. Earth's command. On the Resolute, Vey gripped the rail as the battle unfolded on the holomap. Each blink cost fuel, systems, sanity. His crews were already screaming against the strain. "Keep them chasing shadows," he ordered, voice hoarse. "Every dreadnought that dies buys Earth another heartbeat." Dr. Keene leaned heavily against her console, sweat pouring down her face. Her whisper barely reached him. "They'll adapt. They always adapt. You must be ready to pay the price when they do." Vey looked at her, and for the first time doubt flickered in his eyes. Not for himself, but for the world below, the children, the cities, the fragile blue cradle that had birthed them. "We'll pay it," he said. "Every drop, but not today. Today they bleed." The first break. In the chaos of battle, something unexpected happened. A cluster of alien ships, 40 frigates, 1 cruiser broke formation. But instead of retreating, they turned their weapons not on the humans, but on their own fleet. Mutiny. The Council's fear had rippled down into the ranks. Some commanders, watching their comrades torn apart by an enemy who could appear anywhere, chose survival over loyalty. They opened fire on their fellows, tearing holes in the armada's perfect wall. The executor screamed across the comms, her fury like thunder. "Traitors, you will be scoured." But her rage did not stop it. The first crack in the armada was no longer human. It was empire, breaking from within. Earth below. On Earth, billions watched the skis. Cities gathered in plazas, families huddled in bunkers, soldiers stood in trenches with eyes raised to heavens ablaze. They knew they were ants beneath titans, yet in that moment they did not cower. For above them, human ships danced with gods and lived. And across every screen, every broadcast, a single message repeated in Captain Vey's voice. "They came to erase us. They found ghosts in the dark. Humanity stands." And the world roared back, not in fear but in defiance. The storm had arrived. The battle had begun. And for the first time in its endless reign, the Empire was not certain of victory. Humanity had made them bleed. And the blood would not stop. The void was fire. But even fire has rhythm. The human ships blinked in, struck like daggers, then vanished. Again and again until the armada seemed to burn from within. Yet patterns emerged. The Empire's commanders were no fools. With each loss they adapted. Their formations shifted. Gaps closed faster. Energy nets extended to trap the sudden bursts of displacement. And with each adaptation, the Blink crews paid more. On the Resolute, Captain Elias Vey leaned over the railing as another report crackled in. "Asterion down, reactor collapse, survivors none." The words fell heavy. Another crew gone, another name to carry. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, just one, before answering. "Mark their coordinates. We'll recover what we can. Blink again. Sir, fuel strain's critical. Half the drives are. Blink again. His voice was iron, but inside it shook. The ghost and the blade. In the command gallery, Dr. Mara Keene knelt beside a console, hands trembling. The blink matrix before her pulsed like a dying heart, every surge of light tearing at her insides as though the ship drank her strength. She wiped blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. Arya, the lieutenant with the sharp eyes, saw it. "Doctor, you can't keep this up." Keene gave her a faint, weary smile. "Neither can they." Her gaze drifted to the screens, where the Armada still blotted the void like a living wall. Her whisper carried only to herself. "But if we can make them doubt, just enough." The Empire adjusts. On the apex, the Prime Executor watched her fleet tear itself apart under phantom blows. Her mandibles ground in fury. They strike, then vanish, cowards. Yet beneath her rage lay calculation. The human's tactic, brilliant though it was, could not last. No drive was infinite, no trick eternal. "Deploy lattice-net squadrons," she commanded. "Let them blink into a cage. I want a live vessel. I want to know how Prey learned this art." Her voice rolled across comms, cold as stone. "And when you seize one, burn its crew before the other's eyes." Her fleet moved, reshaping. The storm was changing. A glimpse of Earth. On Earth, life continued, but under the shadow of death. In London, children huddled in underground stations, drawing ships on paper scraps, whispering stories of their fathers and mothers fighting above. In Lagos, a pastor stood among a crowd, holding a battered radio aloft as Vey's transmissions came through, his voice like scripture. "Humanity stands." In Santiago, a woman kissed her soldier brother goodbye as he boarded a transport, knowing he might never return, but refusing to let her tears fall until he was gone. The war above was vast, incomprehensible, but below it was intimate. Every blink, every battle scar was carved into human hearts. The trap. The Resolute blinked again. But this time, something was wrong. Instead of open void, they emerged into a lattice of burning light. Energy webs arced in every direction, trapping them in a cage forged from 100 interlinked cruisers. Sirens wailed, systems screamed. "Blink, blink out," Arya shouted. But the drive only whined, sputtered, and went dark. Vey gripped the railing, every instinct screaming fight. Weapons free, target their anchors. The Resolute roared. Cannons spat white fury. The lattice buckled, tore half a dozen cruisers bursting into debris, but the net held. And in that moment, hundreds of alien interceptors descended like a swarm of knives. The price. On the bridge, chaos reigned. Crewmen screamed as consoles burst in sparks. The hull shuddered with every impact. Shields faltered. Dr. Keene staggered to her feet, eyes burning with desperation. "Captain," she cried, "there's one way out." Vey turned, blood running from a cut across his brow. "Say it." She pointed at the drive matrix, its veins flickering faint. "Overload it. Not a blink, a tear. Force it to rupture. It'll burn us alive, but it'll take the net with us." The crew went silent. Vey stared at her. His silence stretched until every heartbeat felt like thunder. "Then do it." Keene's hands shook as she set the sequence. Every keystroke felt like betrayal, but also salvation. The ship screamed louder, a beast in its death throes. And then light. The Resolute tore through the lattice like a knife through silk, the explosion so violent it consumed half the squadron holding it. The ship tumbled free, burning, bleeding, alive only by stubborn will. But Keene collapsed, her body spent, blood on her lips. "Doctor," Arya rushed to her side. Keene's eyes fluttered open. Her voice was barely air. "Not yet, not until it's done." And then she smiled, a small, broken smile. "Tell me, did it work?" "It worked," Vey said, voice thick, as the ship drifted clear of the wreckage. "You saved us." Her smile lingered, even as her eyes closed. The galaxy breaks. News of the net's destruction spread, not as a victory for the Armada, but as proof the humans could not be trapped. In the slave pits of Durin, the overseers beat their charges harder, but the slaves only whispered louder. They broke the net. On the rebel moon of Pharaohs, fighters painted human symbols on their ships and launched raids, shouting into the void, "We are not afraid." The Empire's own soldiers felt the rot. Doubt seeped into them, corrosive as acid. What were 3,000 ships against prey that would not die? A letter unsent. In the quiet after battle, Captain Vey sat alone in his quarters, blood still dried on his skin. On the table lay a hollow recorder. He touched it, hesitated, then spoke. "To my daughter, Elen, if you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it. But I want you to know your father didn't fight for glory. He didn't fight because he hated. He fought because he loved. He loved a world worth protecting. He loved you." His hand trembled. He shut the recorder off before his voice broke. And he whispered into the silence, "Forgive me." The executor's oath. On the apex, the prime executor raged. Her claws tore through consoles as reports came in. Dozens of ships lost, the net destroyed, morale fracturing. But she stood tall, her voice booming across the Armada. "They bleed, they burn, they die, and still they resist. But hear me, this is not their triumph. This is their last gasp. We are the storm, we will not break." Her soldiers roared, but beneath it she tasted the truth. The humans had already broken something, not the Armada, not yet, but the illusion, the certainty of empire. The storm was far from over. And in the shadow of Earth, with fires burning in every sky, humanity prepared for the next wave, knowing it would cost more than ships, more than lives. It would cost their very soul. On the Resolute, Captain Vey's voice thundered across all channels. "Every ship, every gun, every fighter, hold the line. Not one of them touches Earth while we draw breath." Human vessels, battered and bleeding, formed a ragged wall before the planet. Hundreds remained of thousands. Orbitals flickered with shields half broken, but they still burned with fire. The Empire pressed harder. Dreadnoughts surged forward, their cannons spewing annihilation. Carriers unleashed tides of interceptors, filling the void like locusts. For every ship humanity destroyed, 10 more pressed in. Still they fought. Blink ships darted through the chaos, vanishing into shadows, striking and vanishing again. Conventional frigates held formation, shields overlapping, daring the Armada to break them. Fighters flew suicide runs, weaving through swarms to tear at carriers' bellies. It was not strategy alone, it was defiance given shape. The ground trembles. On the surface, alien landers began to descend. Arya's unit, scattered across the ridge, opened fire with everything they had: rail rifles, shoulder launchers, mines buried in soil. The first lander erupted in flames, torn apart midair. The second crashed into the city outskirts, disgorging armored giants, their weapons cutting through stone and steel. Arya sprinted through the rubble, her breath ragged, rifle bucking against her shoulder. She killed one, then another, but for each she dropped, more emerged. Civilians huddled in broken buildings. A boy clutched a stuffed toy, eyes wide as soldiers fought above him. Arya dropped beside him, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Stay down," she whispered. "We'll hold them." But inside she felt the truth. They couldn't hold forever. The blink collapse. On the Resolute, Dr. Keene stirred from her cot, body broken but mind still alive. She dragged herself to the console, ignoring Vey's protests. "The drives are collapsing," she said, voice raw. "If we keep blinking like this, they'll tear themselves apart, and us with them." Vey's jaw tightened. "Then we use them one last time, one strike, one wound they can't recover from." Keene met his gaze, and in her eyes he saw it. She had already decided how this ended. The executor descends. From the apex, the Prime Executor watched Earth with cold fury. The humans had bled her armada, torn her perfection into fragments. But now she would end it. She gave the order, bring the apex down. The flagship descended from orbit like a falling star, its cannons opening rivers of fire across the planet's crust. Cities trembled, oceans boiled at the edges, the very air shook. The message was clear: no more games, no more defiance, annihilation. The decision. Vey stood before the hollow of Earth, its blue marred by fire. Around him, officers waited for his word, their faces pale but unyielding. He spoke softly, but his voice carried. The apex is their heart, cut it and the armada falters, but it's suicide. Silence. Then Arya's voice, crackling through comms from the surface. Sir, do it. If that ship falls, every soul down here gets another chance. And if we fall with it, at least the world remembers we didn't kneel. Her words struck deeper than any order. Vey looked at Keen. She nodded once, blood staining her lips. The decision was made. The strike. The Resolute and the last surviving Blink ships rallied. 10 vessels, torn and battered, engines screaming. They blinked. Straight into the shadow of the apex. Alarms shrieked. Cannons roared. Dreadnought escorts scrambled to intercept. But the Blink ships wove through them like ghosts, reappearing inside formations, tearing them apart, vanishing again. The apex loomed larger, its hull bristling with weapons, a fortress in the void. Target its core, Vey ordered, voice steady though his hands shook. All drives prepare for overload. Keen whispered, this will kill us. Vey answered, it will save them. The ships blinked one final time, inside the apex. The fire within. The void became hell. The blink drives ruptured, tearing holes in space itself. Explosions rippled through the apex's spine, fire consuming decks, soldiers, engines. The fortress ship screamed as metal bent and broke, splitting open like a dying beast. From Earth's surface, millions watched as the black Leviathan shattered in orbit, fire raining across the sky. The armada froze, the impossible had happened. The heart of their power, their symbol of eternity, broken. And with that, something inside the invincible war machine cracked. The cost. The Resolute was gone, every Blink ship with it. In silence, Vey's final transmission echoed across the fleet and the world below. We gave them our lives, now take back yours. His voice faded into static. On Earth, soldiers lifted their weapons higher. In orbit, the surviving frigates roared with fury, charging dreadnoughts head-on. On distant worlds, rebels screamed in triumph and fire. Humanity had paid its blood price. But the galaxy had seen the wound. The galaxy awakens. In the days that followed, the ripple spread. Entire battalions of conquered species mutinied, raising human symbols as banners. Slave worlds rose in fire. Systems once silent erupted in rebellion. The Empire still had ships, still had armies, but no longer had certainty, and that was a wound no fleet could heal. Humanity had not won, not yet, but they had broken the myth. And myths, once shattered, could never be rebuilt. Above Earth, in the silence after the storm, Arya stood among the ruins of her unit, smoke curling in the sky. She lifted her eyes to the stars where the apex had burned, her heart breaking yet unyielding. Captain, she whispered, though no one could hear, we'll carry it forward, I promise. The wind carried her words away. But perhaps, just perhaps, the stars heard. She sat alone on the back ramp of the evac bird, the desert wind rushing past her face, the night sky wide and endless. No one spoke. The men she had carried, the ones she had pulled from fire and ruin, slept against each other in fragile exhaustion. Some leaned on their rifles. Some simply closed their eyes, their bodies giving in to the weight of survival. Mara didn't sleep, couldn't. Her hands still shook faintly as if the echoes of gunfire were trapped in her bones. The sound of the last explosion still throbbed in her ears. She closed her eyes and saw flashes, the flames consuming the outpost, the child's eyes when she'd pulled her free, the look on Captain Rourke's face before he whispered thank you, his voice breaking like a boy's. The pilot glanced back once but said nothing. Respect, perhaps, or maybe he knew better than to disturb someone whose silence spoke more than words could. She breathed in the dry air, let it burn her lungs, and then released it in a slow exhale. This was the part no one saw, the in-between, the coming down from fire into quiet, the place where soldiers measured themselves not against enemies but against the weight of memory. A hand touched her shoulder. It was Alvarez. His face was lined with dirt, streaked with the salt of sweat, his eyes tired but clear. "You saved us," he said simply. His voice was raw, stripped of rank, stripped of bravado, just a man speaking truth. She shook her head. "We saved each other." But he didn't let go. "No, you carried us when we couldn't walk. You stayed when we wanted to give up. Don't let anyone tell you different." Her throat tightened. Words hovered heavy, but she swallowed them back. What could she say? That she was afraid every step, that she doubted herself until the very end, that she wanted, more than anything, to believe her heart still mattered in a world that kept overlooking it. Instead, she just nodded, and he squeezed her shoulder once before sitting back, letting silence cover them both. The city lights grew in the distance, faint, trembling stars on the horizon. Civilization, safety, or at least the illusion of it. The closer they drew, the heavier Mara felt. The mission was over, but the weight of it was not. Because she knew what awaited her. Debriefs, reports, questions from people who hadn't seen what she had seen, hadn't felt the heat of fire or the sting of silence. And worst of all, the looks. The same dismissive eyes that had glanced past her at the briefing table, now forced to reconcile with what she had done. Would they finally see her? Or would they turn her strength into a story told in numbers and maps, stripping the heart from it? The helicopter touched down with a shudder. The ramp lowered and the men filed out slowly, limping, leaning, alive. Mara walked last. The night air was cooler here, touched with the distant hum of generators, the faint smell of oil and steel. Waiting on the tarmac was Colonel Armitage, his posture rigid, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sharp as ever. He stepped forward, scanned the survivors, then landed his gaze on her. For the first time, he didn't look past her. He held her in his stare, unblinking, and she met it steady, unwavering. Something flickered in his eyes, not warmth, not apology, but recognition. "Captain Vey," he said, his voice low, "you brought them home." It wasn't praise, it wasn't an award, it was something heavier, a truth that carried weight. She only answered with a nod. The others were led away for medical checks, debriefs, clean clothes. Mara lingered on the edge of the tarmac, the night pressing close, her shadow stretching long under the floodlights. Alone again, quiet again, but not empty. Because she knew now what her silence had meant. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't invisibility. It was the strength to hold others when they broke, to carry the afraid, the wounded, the lost, to bear the weight no one else dared to touch. She remembered something her mother used to say, long before war, long before uniforms and weapons. The heart is the heaviest thing you'll ever carry, but if you can carry others inside it, you'll never truly fall. Mara closed her eyes, let the memory settle, let it steady her. In the days that followed, reports were written, medals were mentioned, debates were had in offices far away from the desert dust. Some argued she had disobeyed protocol. Others whispered that she had saved a dozen lives that would otherwise be names carved into stone. She didn't argue, didn't attend the meetings. She stayed with her men, sat beside Alvarez during surgery, held Rourke's hand when nightmares woke him screaming, listened when the youngest, barely 20, confessed he couldn't face going home because he didn't know how to tell his mother what he had seen. This was where she belonged, not behind a podium, not on a file, among the broken, among the afraid. Her heart was quiet, yes, but it was steady, and they felt it. One evening, weeks later, she walked past a group of recruits on the training field. They watched her as she passed, curious, whispering. One of them asked another, "Is that her? The one from the outpost?" Mara kept walking. She didn't correct them, didn't slow. Because she understood something now. Legends didn't need voices. They didn't need noise. They only needed truth. She reached the edge of the field, where the wind caught her hair and the horizon stretched wide. She breathed deep, and for the first time in years the air felt light. No one would ever truly know what it had cost her, how fear had gnawed at her, how silence had been her only refuge. But that was all right. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in the quiet, under a sky painted with fading light, Captain Mara Vey walked on, not for recognition, not for glory, but because carrying the broken had always been her way of standing tall. The night closed around her. The sounds of the camp faded. Only her footsteps remained. And in their rhythm, in that simple, steady beat, the strength of a quiet heart echoed on, unseen but unforgettable.